on the internet as a kind of a, I guess it's a meme. I don't know what you call it. Uh, but there was this woman who was on a vacation in Iceland, and it went to a kind of scenic overlook, and everyone got off the tour bus, and she changed her clothes. And when she returned, she heard the bus driver say that we're missing someone. And the only description, the articles were kind of vague, was like, we're missing an Asian woman. And so everyone started to look for this Asian woman. And it was like a big deal. Like the Icelandic equivalent of the National Guard was called in, helicopters were abounding. They were going to get dogs and really just try to find this woman. And at some point, very early in the morning, the woman who had gotten off the bus realized they were looking for her. She hadn't recognized, probably a language issue, she hadn't recognized the description of herself. So the headline was, "Missing Woman Finds Herself in Iceland After Joining Her Own Search Party." And what I love about this is that this is like very much the way in which we sometimes approach spiritual practice. Like there's a sense of, I gotta find it, looking for something. There's a kind of searching. And I sometimes wonder, like, was the woman lost? Like she was kind of lost, but she wasn't really lost. There's a similar story in the Zen tradition about a man who was searching far and wide for a jewel, this most precious jewel that he had heard about. And after years, decades of searching, he stumbled upon a mirror. It's ancient times, I guess, didn't have a lot of mirrors, and he saw that the jewel was embedded in his forehead. It's there all along. So in meditation, we learn to move from this constant searching, this constant doing. Doing is, human beings probably by and large are doers, but we have this kind of on steroids in our culture. It's a badge of honor to be busy and doing a lot of things. And so when we begin meditation practice, we're moving from the realm of doing to the realm of being, like putting down some of that activity. And moving from the world of thinking, concepts, ideas, paradigms, views, beliefs, to the realm of feeling. The mind is very capable with our concepts to rehash the past and project the future or worry about the future. But when we connect with the breath as a felt sense, you can only feel this moment's breath. You can't feel the next moment's breath. There's an immediacy to the five senses that helps us ground us from this sort of compulsion that the mind usually has to be forward-looking or backward-looking. So one of the ways that I like to think about meditation practice is that we're developing the wisdom to know where to rest the mind, where to rest our attention. Kind of the Buddhist way of speaking, you can say where to rest the heart. Like where do we don't really make a distinction between mind, heart, body. So where do we rest the heart in a way that feels restful in a world that's turbulent and difficult, in incarnation as human beings that is challenging. We have these tender hearts that break easily, these bodies that break easily and decay and are ultimately subject to being recycled. So developing the wisdom to know where to rest the heart, and so many things vying for our attention, vying for our care, vying for our interest. Like how we discern moment to moment, where's the most skillful place I can be putting my mind. And then part of this is, I was talking about on Wednesdays, the like unlearning the myth of multitasking. Like there's now so much research that pretty much, in my mind, conclusively established that when you multitask, the quality of your both tasks or all the tasks degrade, you're more prone to mistakes. So in meditation, we can develop kind of more of an ability to monotask, so we're more efficient, we're more productive, we make less mistakes. But so many things vying for our attention at any given moment. How do we develop a kind of wisdom to know, like, this is what deserves my attention in this moment? Think of attention as kind of a precious currency that, we should use wisely. And developing the wisdom to know where to rest the heart, and then developing the meditative ability to actually do that. We have some ideas about where we want to rest our attention, but then the attention has a mind of its own. So that's primarily what I wanted to talk about, is some actionable strategies that come all the way from the time of the Buddha to develop some stewardship over the mind, to have this meditative ability to rest the heart, where it's wise, where we are nourished, where we are doing whatever we're doing with full engagement, whether it's closing down bridges and marching in the street, or whether it's tending to a child or an elder, or being in community with friends. So the Buddha had a word for the wandering mind that I love. It's called papancha. It's just like the sound of that word, papancha. And it has this meaning of, doesn't really have a direct translation. People talk about it as being proliferation of thought. The word has some etymology that's like diffuse or spreading out, complicating and elaborating or distorting. Sometimes we call this the monkey mind. It's the mind that just goes from association to association to association. Or if we're troubled by something, it's like kind of going over the same thing again and again, trying to figure it out. So words from the Buddha: the restless, agitated mind, hard to protect, hard to control. The sage makes straight as the fletcher the shaft of an arrow. The mind hard to control, flighty, alighting where it wishes, one does well to tame. The disciplined mind brings happiness. The mind hard to see, subtle, alighting where it wishes, the sage protects. The watched mind brings happiness. I learned from a friend and colleague, meditation teacher, that to be a fletcher, someone who makes arrows, was like a hallowed art in ancient times. Now it's probably, factories and fiberglass, but in the old days, to make an arrow out of wood, you had to straighten the wood. And straight is not that common in nature. Things tend to have little curves and variations. So to make an arrow that is straight, fletcher has to have a lot of skill to choose the right wood, to shape it roughly in the form of an arrow. And then one thing they used to do to get it straight is steam it so that it would be slightly pliable, and then kind of direct it into an arrow that would be flight worthy. And I like to believe that analogy is apropos, because training the mind is a kind of skill. Like, we have to work with it. We have to kind of develop that. And we get more and more mastery the more and more we practice. So this idea of taming the mind, of seeing the mind, is a central tenet of Buddhist meditation practice. And another thing that's kind of central to Buddhist practice is this idea of conditions. That the world kind of works in a lawful way. There are governing principles. One thing leads to another. This is kind of actually fairly revolutionary at the time, in 2,600 years ago in Asia, where people believed in magic and predestination and all kinds of different things. So this idea that when we meditate, we're stewarding certain conditions that lead to the outcome we desire. You can't make the mind be quiet, mostly. Maybe some of you have that ability. But we can cultivate these kinds of conditions of stillness, of steadiness, of relaxation, of secluding the mind, when we kind of attend to only what's in front of us instead of attending to the broader array of things that are happening. This creates a condition where the mind can settle down naturally. Some conditions that the Buddha spoke about that cause papancha, excessive thinking, are they're fairly obvious, but I think it's an interesting list. When we're obsessed with what we want, that creates a lot of thinking. When we're obsessed by what we don't want, or we want to get rid of, when we're obsessed by our views, when we're obsessed with becoming, this idea of who we want to be, what we want to become, can even be good things, want to be a good meditator. And the last one is obsession with conceit, which is just the comparing mind. We're often going through the world, I'm better than, I'm worse than. Interestingly, I'm the same as is even considered a form of conceit. We just avoid the whole endeavor of comparing. The other thing that plays a strong role in obsessive thinking is feeling tone. The Buddha called Vedana. So this attribute of something that is, it's not even an attribute of something, of the construction in the mind that appears when we see a sight or hear a sound that gives it a kind of pleasant evaluation or an unpleasant evaluation or something in the middle. And by and large, this is a force that drives so much of our behavior, that we're moving towards the pleasant, trying to get more pleasant and moving away from what's unpleasant. And both these things lead to a lot of extra thinking. It's a little piece called Thinkers Anonymous. It started out innocently enough. I began to think at parties, just a little now and then to loosen up. Inevitably, though, one thought led to another, and soon I was more than just a social thinker. I began to think alone, to relax, I told myself, but even then I knew it wasn't true. Thinking became more and more important to me, and eventually I was thinking all the time. I would get up in the morning and start thinking before breakfast, and I would think right up until I passed out at night. This actually goes on for pages and pages, but I'll stop there, and it's meant to be lighthearted, but, being addicted is no joke. And there is a kind of addictive quality to our thinking. So another version of this from The Onion. Paterson, New Jersey. Quickly kicking off the sheets and reaching for a notepad on his nightstand, local 27-year-old Kyle Dowling reportedly sprang out of bed at 3 a.m. to jot down an idea for a brand new worry. Sometimes the best, most crippling new anxieties come to you in the middle of the night, so it's good to always have a pen and paper nearby to record them, said Dowling, rapidly scribbling several shorthand notes. If I think of a paralyzing fear relating my personal and professional life and I don't immediately write it down, there's a good chance I'll forget about it by the time I fall asleep. And this is hyperbole, but how loyal are we to our suffering? How loyal are we to keeping track of all our debilitating thoughts? So the teaching from the Buddha, it's called the Vitakka Santana Sutta, which translate roughly as the removal of distracting thoughts. And the Buddha talked about 5 ways of working with so-called distracting thoughts. So the first one is replacing the thoughts. giving attention to other thoughts. And the analogy he uses is just as a skilled carpenter or his apprentice might knock out, remove, or extract a coarse peg by means of a fine one, so too the practitioner gives attention to some other sign connecting with that which is wholesome. The mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. So this is like an embedded concept that's worth highlighting, is that one of the central principles in the Buddhist worldview is this idea that certain thoughts and deeds and actions have a quality where they lead to the alleviation of suffering, they lead to, of ourselves or our others, they lead to clarity of vision, they lead to good decision making. And then, so we call those wholesome or skillful. And then there are those kinds of acts of body, speech, and mind that lead to suffering for ourselves and others, or lead to poor decision making. You think of the difference of being contented and peaceful and being enraged. You know, how's your decision making when you're enraged? And so part of the meditative practice is to develop some first discernment, to just see what's happening in the mind, and is this helpful? And then developing the ability to shift it if it's not. So one way to substitute thoughts is with a mantra. A mantra that I got from, I've been given many mantras. Some of the mantras are, like put on a piece of paper and you burn it and you never utter that out loud in the presence of another person. And then other mantras that I've gotten are more mainstream, like one that comes from the Thai forest tradition is Buddho. Buddho is like the Buddha within, the awakened one within. And so you can, in meditation, or if you're just having obsessive thoughts, you can just recite this. It coordinates nicely with the breath. Inhale, Bud. Out, hold, do, Bud, do, Bud, do. This is a way of leaving those obsessive thoughts behind. If you have a metta or loving kindness practice, some of you might be familiar with this, phrases that can be offered. May I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be at ease, to substitute for whatever drama or internal talk is going on. So the first one, substituting the thoughts. The second one, reflect on the effect of these thoughts. It's like really to feel the unwholesomeness or the afflictiveness of those thoughts. And sometimes it's complicated when I think about being righteously indignant. There's flavors of empowerment, but it's kind of like if you probe more deeply, you kind of get to the Buddha described anger as a kind of sickness. There's a kind of sickness in it. So feeling the suffering in the thoughts, feeling the effects of some thoughts. The analogy that the Buddha used was quite graphic to make a point. Just as a man or a woman, young and youthful and fond of ornaments, would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake or a dog or a human being were hung around their neck. Like a very vivid picture of we're carrying around afflictive thoughts. It's no different than carrying around a dead thing around our neck. And if we had a dead thing around our neck, we would immediately remove it. This is related to this little poem called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. Any of you know this? Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to get out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. It isn't my fault. It takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. It's my fault. I know where I am. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down a different street. So it's like we know where certain types of thinking lead us, so we have to just have like the gumption to make a decision to do differently, to walk down the street. One of the most effective interventions to stop smoking is mindful smoking. It's counterintuitive, but actually when you tell people you can smoke, but if you smoke, you have to do it alone. And you have to be really present with the experience of smoking. Some larger percentage of people realize this is kind of disgusting. It doesn't really taste that good. I don't really feel that good. And it helps people quit. And after each of these strategies, the Buddha says one's mind becomes steadied, internally quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. So the third one, ignore them, ignore the thoughts. The analogy the Buddha gives is just as a man with good eyes who did not want to see forms would either shut his eyes or look away, so too. So this is like letting them be in the background, not engaging, not feeding them. This is back to where I started, developing the wisdom of knowing where to rest the mind and knowing where not to rest the mind. A version of this that I'm in a constant kind of dance with is consuming news and information, because it's pretty universally negative and alarming and shocking and disquieting and agitating. And yet I feel some civic obligation, I guess, to be an informed citizen. I think even just to have that as a question and awareness, like what can this system handle? And for all the things that I might want to do in the world that are beneficial, am I going to be able to do them if I'm collapsing under the weight of all this oppressive information? There's a story from the Native American tradition about as a young boy gets bullied at school and then comes home to his grandfather and is talking about being bullied and of like wanting to take revenge or wanting to get even or something like that. And grandfather says, there are two wolves inside me. And one wolf is vengeant and violent and fierce, ferocious, a warrior. And the other wolf inside of me is playful and curious and, like a puppy, like a dog, a good friend. And they're in a constant battle. So the little boy says, which one wins, or which one's gonna win? And the grandfather says, the one that I feed is the one that will win. It's like, what are we giving attention to? Which streams of thinking are we gonna support and grow? So the fourth strategy for removal of thoughts is giving attention to the stilling of thoughts. So the analogy that the Buddha gives is, just as a person walking fast might consider, why am I walking fast? What if I walk slowly? And then they would walk slowly. And then they might consider, why am I walking slowly? What if I stand? Then they would stand. And pretty soon they're lying down. Substituting each grosser posture for a posture that is more subtle. So this is kind of like downshifting a little bit, like, you notice that more energy is being expended in whatever it is you're doing to just like ratchet it down. Take it down a notch, what do they say? Yeah. And I love this particular analogy because if I'm running through the forest, there's all kinds of activation happening in my body, blood pressure, heart rate, perspiration, probably a cascade of neurochemicals and hormones that are doing their job. And to regulate myself, I just stop. And the nature of the body is to be in homeostasis, so the body regulates itself. It's not something I mean, I could say I'm regulating myself. Maybe I can hold up my arms or take deeper breaths or something, but on some level, it's actually outside my control. It's just a function of nature moving through me that this equilibrium will happen. Like a snow globe, you shake up the snow globe, and there's no amount of manipulation of the snow globe that will settle the snow. It's only putting it down and letting nature do its thing. So this is where I would say I'm prone to over-exuberance. And when I find myself in that state of over-exuberance, it looks like I'm like waving my arms, or there's a lot of extra. And so just bringing attention to what's extra in this moment. Actually, when I teach meditation retreats, we tell people to physically slow down as they're moving through the retreat center, because this is a way of kind of ratcheting down the energy of kind of fighting against the habitual ways in which we're like running around a lot. It's a tricky thing because, I'm giving you techniques, and then also like the technique itself can cause agitation, like stuff like this back to the snow globe. If I'm trying to it's just stirring it up more. So we have to be discerning in the attitude and energy with which we use these strategies. So the fifth way of dealing with intrusive or distracting thoughts, to be used very sparingly and occasionally, this is kind of like the last resort, is stopping them with energy. The Buddha says, when with his teeth clenched and tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth, one beats down constraints and crushes mind with mind, ending any unwholesome thoughts. Just as a strong man might seize a weaker head by the man or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him, and crush him. It's funny, it's like a path of peace, a path of harmony, but there are a lot of these images of, kind of violent, that are made for a point. So this is like, you think of a puppy, that's like, sit. You have to have like some energy in it because they're pack animals and they respond to that authority. Or a child that's about to run in the street, stop. It's like some force, but not tipping into the realm of anger or aggression, because anger and aggression itself is more agitating. I will sometimes say to myself, enough. Like a little bit of disgust in it. or come on, Gullu, get it together. Like just a kind of like a way of encouraging. Okay, let's see. So, I started by saying that, we're often searching. We talk about spiritual practices being on a path. A path sort of implies a journey from one place to another, some idea that some other place is better, some tendency to devalue this moment with the idea that some other future moment with a future me will be better. And yet the idea of a path is useful. My teachers, Sinisaro and Kisaro, talk about this in terms of path activity. And it's not so much that we're on a path that goes somewhere, it's that we engage with meditative activity here and now. So a moment of having a wise intention, a moment of speaking wisely, moments of any good ethical conduct that leads to other people feeling safe, other people feeling the gift of fearlessness, when you can become a safe person, developing the skill to arouse states of joy and loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, moments of mindfulness. This is a big one because we can do this almost anytime, anywhere, to just be aware of what's happening rather than just caught up in the momentum of whatever's happening. And then moments of seeing the constant flux that's around us, that every phenomenon, everything we experience in this life is one of 6 things. Sounds appear in consciousness. If the ears work, sounds appears in taste, smells, touch, thoughts. They all appear in consciousness and then they fall away, appearing and disappearing. Constant flux. And yet there can be a tendency to want to hang on to some of this, but we can see that these thoughts, I've spent a lot of time talking about taming, are flickers of energy in a neural network that are passing through a sky-like mind. The Buddha said, "So should you see this fleeting world, a star at dawn, a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, a phantom, and a dream." There's a related thing here, which is that there's an expression that you hear in the teachings of the Buddha. It's like sometimes it's uninstructed worldling, and sometimes it's a run-of-the-mill ordinary person. And these are ways of describing people who have not been exposed to the teachings, who are not practitioners. And the run-of-the-mill person is very obsessed with whatever's happening in their experience. The meditator, the instructed person, is aware of what's happening in the experience, but more focused on how they're relating to it. So, dharmas are endless. So this movement from thinking into feeling is so important because the map is not the territory. Thoughts are, by their nature, just approximations of reality. And they're important, we need them. We need to be able to think, and communication is based on thinking, but are we trapped by them in a kind of virtual reality where we're living in the world we've constructed? Mindfulness is inviting us to augment that constructed world with real-time data, updating the scripts. So Dogen, the 13th century Zen master, said, "Stop searching for phrases and chasing after words. Take the backward step and turn the light inward. Your body, mind itself will drop away and your original face will appear. If you want to attain just this, immediately practice just this." So just this, an inquiry, a connection, a movement of what's happening in this moment is the whole of the practice. Then your body, mind drops away. The original face is this Zen concept of that part of us that is not hindered, not obstructed, that's completely liberated and sort of beyond words, I guess, in some ways. And I'll end with some words from the Dhammapada, words of the Buddha. "There are no footprints in the sky. You won't find the sage out there. The world delights in papancha, conceptual proliferation. Buddhas delight in ni papancha, the ending of conceptual proliferation. There are no footprints in the sky. You won't find the sage out there. There are no eternal conditioned things. Buddhas never waver. So, thank you for listening. And only let 30 seconds for those words to just settle, reestablish the connection inward, aware of the breathing body, aware of your connectedness to ground.